Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us today. Making and keeping connections, friendly or romantic, as an adult can be hard for a lot of reasons. Across the globe, nearly 1 in 6 people are lonely. It's a problem with serious consequences. Every year, about 871,000 deaths are linked to loneliness. That's according to the World Health Organization. Isolation spiked during the COVID-19 pandemic as public places closed up shop. And even when communities reopened, many people never fully rebuilt their social circles. In 2023, former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy said that a lack of social connection can be as harmful as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, leading to higher risks of heart disease, depression, and premature death. While loneliness transcends a lot of labels, higher rates of feeling alone have been found in communities of color, the LGBTQ+ community, and among migrants. So today we're talking about how people are working to bring individuals together by finding creative, unconventional ways to build community and make meaningful connections here in Northeast Ohio. Joining me for this conversation, we have Brittany Marchetti, founder of First Round Cleveland. Hi, Brittany.
Hello.
We also have Rebecca Maxwell with us, founder of She's Company. Rebecca, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We have Abigail Thomas with us, creator and co-leader of Yap Out Yonder. Hi, Abigail.
Hello, good morning.
And Eileen Callahan, member of Cleveland Gals Book Club. Hello, Eileen.
Hi.
If you want to be a part of this conversation, maybe you have a comment or a question about developing friendships, maybe you have a story you'd like to share, maybe you've been to one of the events of the people who are here today on our panel, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. And we have a lot of wonderful people here on our panel, so we're just going to start by going around and learning more about your organizations. And Rebecca, I'll start with you. Tell us about She's Company.
Yeah, so She's Company, basically the way I describe it is we are an event-based organization designed for women to make friends as adults. We have about 3 to 4 events a month, different themes, different venues. We try to switch it up and kind of give different groups of people activities that they want. I really don't love when people say there's nothing to do in Cleveland, because either you don't know about it, you don't have access to it, or you have nobody to do it with. So we kind of bridge that gap there with giving you something to do and just giving you really a reason to get dressed and go out and feel good about yourself. So that's kind of our whole mission there.
Put on the outfit, get out, make some friends, make some connections. Okay, Eileen, tell us about the Cleveland Gals Book Club.
Yeah, so we do a monthly meeting where we all read the same book, but then there are also silent reading nights and other just like fun reading themed events kind of throughout the month. I feel that Sarah and Emily try to plan about one per week. Sometimes they'll double up, sometimes there won't be one, but we'll do everything from like book bedazzling, silent reading nights, a more conventional book club themed event. Sometimes there are workout classes, book swaps. So the goal is to really reach a lot of different readers in a lot of different genres.
And Sarah and Emily are the organizers, the founders?
Yes, Sarah and Emily are the founders. They couldn't be here today. I'm just a member, and then I write our trivia monthly. But
Okay.
yeah.
That's a big contribution, writing the trivia monthly, I'm sure.
I enjoy it, so yeah.
Great. Okay, Abigail, tell us about Yap Out Yonder.
Yeah, so Yap Out Yonder, we are a local co-ed walking and hiking group, really designed with the intentions of making friends and building deeper connections with both with one another and with our natural spaces. So we walk every other Sunday morning. We meet on a different trail local to Northeast Ohio. And really, it's just designed to find a sense of adventure close to home and foster a sense of play. I like to think we're just a bunch of big kids when we're outside, just connecting with one another.
And no shortage of trails here in Northeast
There's
Ohio.
no shortage of trails, so we're still discovering things all the time.
Lots of beautiful spaces. Okay, and Brittany, tell us about First Round Cleveland.
First round is it's speed dating, but for friendship. So I think sometimes being more intentional with who we're spending time with and making friends is something that it can be challenging. And I feel like when you're put in a situation, it's like kind of happenstance if you're going to connect with somebody. But with first round, you go through a list of prompts. You mark down who you think you match with, like who you would go to brunch with is basically the question. And then I give you a list of who you've matched with. And so you leave there knowing you at least are coming away with a group of people that are your matches.
And how often are these events happening?
Right now, they're about once a month. I'd like to get more, but we have I partner up with businesses like restaurants, bars, because first round is I get your first round. So you kind of
okay.
are introduced with a drink on me, and then I would like in the future though to have more than just one.
Okay. Eileen, tell us a little bit more about the book events. Are you all reading the same book right now?
So right now, our Tuesday of next week, our meeting is for Ignite by Brie Bartel. She's actually a local Cleveland author. So
Okay.
that's next week's meeting. And then the month after that, our theme was authors that we've read and really enjoyed as a club in the past. So that will be The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. So if 3 days is too short of notice for some people, you can always join us at the next one. Or if those books just don't fit what you like to read, the silent reading events are really great because you can bring whatever book you're interested in. So you can read whatever you prefer.
A little bit of body doubling, showing up, doing the same thing
Yes.
together, but
Yes.
in community. How are the books selected? When do you choose those?
Great question. So we vote 2 months in advance to give people time to read them. We'll do Instagram polls voting on usually 8 books, and we'll narrow it down to 2. And then at the meeting, 2 months out, we'll vote. The attendees of the meeting will vote on the book for 2 months into the future.
Okay. All right. One of the things that we often hear when we're talking about making community or making friends or whatever is just put yourself out there. So, Rebecca, I want to ask you, what does that look like at a She's Company event?
Yeah, so one of our most commonly asked questions is it weird if I come alone? Like, I get a lot of people like, I'm super anxious, whatever. And I get that. So I am very able to tell them, like, you're going to be maybe alone for 5 minutes. We have people that come to almost every event that have become friends of mine that they know to be on the lookout. Like, people are all there for the same reason. And so it's kind of really easy with women. So they'll just go up to each other if you see someone standing alone. We also try to do like icebreakers, and sometimes we'll do really intentional events where you fill out a survey before, and I basically place you next to somebody that you have something in common with. We do that every year at our Girls Giving. So sometimes it's a lot easier, but sometimes you kind of I have to send out the troops like, hey, there's somebody over there, like, reel them in, come on, see what they're about. But it's really easy for women to do that, I think, when they've been there already. So we have a lot of repeat customers.
Sure. No woman left behind,
Yeah.
kind of being on the lookout. I've seen this posting about on social media with She's Company and have been to some events and have experienced it firsthand. And I want to ask you this, Rebecca. You do a lot of different events. So some of the things we're talking about here are a little bit more niche. How do you decide what kind of event, whether it's going to be a workout activity or a Friendsgiving, Girls Giving activity? How do you decide what it will be?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was a lot of me reaching out to venues or partnering with people. I've been in the service industry for 16 years, so I know a lot of bar owners, and I've worked at a lot of places that, were gracious enough to host us. Now I have a lot of venues reaching out to me to have us there, so I really love in-person meetings. I think a lot more gets done, and I can kind of see a vision. It really all is, I walk in the venue, I see what the vibe is, what their, decor looks like, and then I'm like, all right, this would make a lot of sense here. I'm very particular about the cohesion of an event. I want it all to make sense from the second you walk in to the second that you leave. So we did our pink party at Sora because obviously it's very pink decor. So we kind of fit it with what the venue is. And I just have a running list of ideas and things. And, you get inspiration from TikTok of themed parties and stuff like that. So that helps a lot.
Okay. Abigail, for you, I want to ask you about the ability to talk to strangers. Is that something that comes naturally to you, or is it something that you started Yap Out Yonder because it was something you were looking for?
I think a little bit of both. I feel that I have always been someone who's been drawn to friendships and drawn to community. And I very much am of the belief, similar to what Rebecca said, even if you have to go alone, just go. I mean, many people who come to Yap Out Yonder are coming alone. And even when I started it, almost all of these people that you're showcasing right now, they were strangers to me even at one point and are now friends. But I do think that's the power of the outdoors, is it just getting steps, being outside, it just loosens you up. Your brain is a little clear. And I feel like this is a setting in which the ways in which we're being introduced to each other is not just as professional selves or as colleagues or as moms or whatever it may be. It's just us as people, and we really are just yapping out yonder, and the things that we talk about. Like I said earlier, you would be surprised. I do feel like we're a bunch of big kids. It's easy to strike a conversation when you're outside with a bunch of people who are excited by seeing something as simple as like a pretty tree or a flower over there, and the way we all pause and stop and talk. And then one minute we're talking about a bird we saw, and the next we're talking about reality TV. And I find that making community really can be very simple. It can be easy. It can be as simple as just going on a walk.
There's a reason that small talk is about the weather, right? Because we're all experiencing the weather. Does Yap Out Yonder take a break during the winter here in Northeast Ohio?
We sure don't. And we have had some very cold walks, but people who want to connect and have a desire to connect with each other and have a desire to be outdoors, they do show up. So even I, as the co-leader of Yap Out Yonder, have had to challenge myself to get out of bed, but it's always worth it. But it's been cold. So.
Yeah. What do they say? There's no bad weather, just bad outfits, right?
Yeah.
Layer it up.
That is true.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking about loneliness and making connections with several people who have either founded or are very active in groups here in Northeast Ohio that are dedicated for that purpose. If you want to be a part of this conversation, the number to call is 866-578-0903, or you can send us an email at soi@ideastream.org or message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have a call now from George in Cleveland. George, welcome to The Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Yes, hey ladies, great program. I was just curious in regards to the first round Cleveland, like what happens, for your speed date for friendship? What happens if there's no match for a person? Like, do they get a free second drink?
That's a good question, and it's funny that you say that because I made a joke on Instagram the other day about that. Like, we've never had anybody not have a match, but I think that is what people's concern is when signing up is like, I'm already maybe feeling vulnerable going to this thing where you are being very open about I'm looking for friendship. So it can be intimidating to feel like, what if I am, and I am guilty of this myself, where I'm like, what if I'm just so different that nobody's going to match with me? Like, I'm so unique. And so I want to call it out that if you don't match with somebody, I will get your next drink. I will, you'll be fully covered. And then I also make a joke that you will have one match and it will be me because I have everybody's contact information. But that's never happened, so I don't see it happening. I think everybody, at least, also in these circumstances, I think people tend to open up a little bit more too, and be more open to others in a way that maybe isn't. Like if you're meeting somebody in a grocery line or something, you're not going to be like, yeah, that's somebody that I'm connecting with. But in this situation, I feel like people tend to be a little bit more open with saying, yes, I would get brunch with that person.
Thank you for the call, George. We appreciate it. We have a message in from Jim in Maslin. Jim in Maslin writes, not sure if there will be a second panel, but hello, the danger point for most people is after the working life and work-related friendships go away. That is late 50s to mid-60s and beyond. And that is from Jim in Maslin. Jim, I very much appreciate the perspective. I'm going to invite our panel to respond to this. I also want to say, Jim, sometimes work-related friendships go away when you move. For example, that was an experience that I had when I moved back here from New York after being away for many, many years, coming here and just kind of starting all over. I was lucky to jump into a work situation where I did actually make very good friends, but that's not true for everyone. So I kind of just want to touch on now the demographics that we're seeing at these different groups. So Rebecca, I'll start with you. What kind of a demographic is showing up at She's Company?
So this is also a huge question that we get. I have a lot of women that are in their 50s and they're like, I wish this existed when I was younger. And we're really trying to figure out how to tap into that demographic while still being respectful. I'm very big on naming things, so I want to make sure that it's welcoming and not being like, hey, here's for the old people, because everybody wants connection. So I usually tell them, we are open to all. We'll randomly have people that we haven't met before. They find us on Eventbrite, and they're in their 50s, and they are the ones that have the most fun out of anybody. And I value connections with older people. I think that they're kind of my favorite. So our demographics are typically anywhere from 23 to 46. I'm in my 30s, so there's a lot of women in their 30s and over. But that's kind of what we've seen so far.
Okay. And Eileen, how about for you? What is the demographic looking like at the book gatherings?
So I think anecdotally, I don't have access to like our specific data, but I do think we've seen a shift lately with some of the talk shows and radio programs that we've done. I have been seeing more women in the 40 and above demographic at our meetings. They're open to all. I would say the majority of our members are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. But definitely we read a variety of genres. So we'll read classics, we'll read thrillers, we'll read historical fiction, but there's no age limit on reading. So any genre that we're reading is open to anyone that would like to join.
Abigail, how about for Yap Out Yonder?
Yeah, I would say so. We have a good mix of men and women as well. Like I said, we are a co-ed walking group, and I would say our ages range from 20s to probably 50s. And so that is one thing to address the comment too. I would say when you're considering community, also just be open to what that can look like. Like making a friend can look different than what you'd expect. You can be friends with someone in a field completely unrelated to your work and an age, with a decent gap from where you are. And so that's actually been probably one of my favorite things, is to see the different ways that something as simple as going on a walk brings us together, because for whatever reason, whether you're 20 or 55, we all need this break. We all clearly need an hour of our day, but we're just outside, we're not on our phones, we're with each other. So just be open to what community can look like, and just come on a walk with us.
Brittany, how about the demographics at First Round Cleveland? How's that look?
It's pretty similar to what everybody said, and I think Abigail's point was right on what I've seen as well, where it's very much like we have 21-year-olds who have like graduated college and moved back to Cleveland or moved to Cleveland, and it's sort of like, okay, what do I do now? Like, what's next? And then we've had parents, moms in their 40s, 50s, whose kids have left for college, and it's like, okay, what do I do next? And I think watching some of those interactions, because that is what I do. I kind of am sitting there and just sort of waiting until it's my time to ring the bell. Watching those and hearing feedback on those is really valuable, because it is like, okay, there are things we're not going to have in common, but there are things that just bring us together in general that I wouldn't necessarily approach that person in public and find this connection. But because you're forced to talk to somebody for 5 minutes, you start to see where you have these similarities regardless of age or, place in life.
And I want to ask our group here, as we're talking about these events, and as I mentioned, some of them are kind of more niche, some of them are more general. What do you do to make that connection kind of jump out of the event and then be more lasting? Does anyone have a thought they'd like to share on making a lasting connection from these events that are happening?
I think it's semi-easy at book club if you meet somebody that you have similar reading taste to, because you just automatically have something to talk about. So that really does help break the ice and take away some of the awkwardness of what do we talk about. I have lasting friends that I've met through book club that I now see at birthdays and, just in life outside of. But I think that having that initial interest in common is really helpful.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on continuing? And this is something that might be more related to your work, Brittany. How do you encourage people to then connect after they leave the speed dating friendship event?
Yes. So this is actually, we got some feedback on this about, okay, now I have this list of phone numbers, email addresses, social handles, whatever. What do I do now? So what I've started doing is building like a list of group chats. So when you get your list of matches, you also get a paragraph of people that you should start, like that all matched with each other. So like instead of it just being one-on-one, it's like, here's a group of 5 people. This is a great time to start a group chat. That to me is like one step closer to where I want to get, which is actually scheduling, like having what I'm calling a second round. So it's kind of in the works right now where I will, as a result of your group that you kind of came together with, I'm trying to figure out how to partner with these same sort of restaurants, bars, and make like a set time. Like, okay, it's Sunday at 11 a.m., you are invited to get brunch. We're having like a standing reservation where it's this group is here. And I always offer I send the email with all of the matches, and I say, if you need help facilitating this, like if this feels like it's too much, like you did the work, I'm happy to step in and make those connections for you, like the second connection. I do have one, like there's one person who's come to, I think, all of my events, who she will contact me all the time and say, like, we've had happy hour like every week, like this with this group of people that she met at first round. And that's like my favorite part of it, because it's like you really do have to take that next step. But I'm there to facilitate if I can. It is just a matter of trying to help get that moving.
Okay. We have a call now from Marissa in Dayton. Marissa, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi. Well, since I'm obviously from Dayton, I was just wondering if you guys have any sister groups that are more local in the Dayton or Cincinnati area that you like partner or work with by chance?
Thank you for the question, Marissa. Wondering if anybody here is partnering with any groups outside of Cleveland at this moment. Rebecca?
So we have had an event in Columbus and Akron so far. We are having another one in Akron in June. And the goal is to branch out to all the different cities. Basically, what I need to do is solidify my back end of things, so I'm not just throwing somebody out into the sharks. So we're definitely going to be looking for people to kind of run those events, where I handle all the back end stuff. You kind of get there, you check people in. I kind of give you the rundown of how it works, but we're definitely working on the build out, but just want to make sure we're making it make sense before we start branching.
Making sure it's well supported and it can be as great as it's happening here in
If you
Cleveland.
know any venues that want to host us, send me an email.
Okay, there you go. So this brings me to a question, though, that Marissa has raised. Thank you for the question, Marissa, is how people find these groups. I'm sure all of you are, publicizing on social media, but I want to ask you specifically, Eileen, since you're not a founder of this group and you found it, what it was that motivated you to find it. And I know you're not necessarily from here, this area. So tell us about that and how you ended up finding the book club.
Yeah, so I'm not from Cleveland. I saw posts from the Klegal Book Club on Instagram, and I had some friends from work at that point. I had lived here for a year or two, and we just all enjoyed reading and decided to go to an event together. And it was so much less scary than I thought it was going to be. We saw this post and, it took us a couple months to kind of work up the courage to attend an event. And then once we actually got there, I'm sure you guys get similar feedback that once people actually come to an event, it's so easy because people are all there for this shared purpose of meeting people. And even as a member who's now been going for about 2 consistent years, I still meet new friends every time I attend an event. So, yeah.
We have a note in from Michael G. Michael G says he didn't catch the names for the groups for meeting people or their contact information. Will we announce that information or post it online? Michael G, I can tell you if you go to ideastream.org/SOI, you'll be able to find the contact information for everyone here. I will run down the list again and just remind people what we're here talking about today. So thank you for the question, Michael G. Here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about loneliness and we're talking about making lasting connections. And we're doing that with a group of people who have either founded or represent organizations here in Northeast Ohio. So here with me, we have Brittany Marchetti, the founder of First Round Cleveland, which focuses on a speed date style matching style for making friends. We also have Abigail Thomas with us, the creator and co-leader of Yap Out Yonder, which is a walking group for people taking a slower approach to things, not a running group, as some people might be inclined to join. And if you want to go faster, no shame to you either. We've got Eileen Callahan here. She's a member of the Kleagals Book Club. And we also have Rebecca Maxwell, founder of She's Company. So again, links with information to all of these organizations will be on ideastream.org/SOI. I want to ask people about, I just mentioned publicizing on social media, and this is a question for the group. What do you think about social media and the impact that's had on developing lasting in-person connections? Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we do most of our marketing via social media. I'm very active on all types of social media. So we have kind of found that the power of social media is crazy. For our first Akron event, I was very nervous because I don't know a ton of people in Akron and, kind of just sending out the word and like Instagram sometimes isn't enough. I made a TikTok and we were at 30 tickets sold. 10 hours later, we were at 100 tickets sold because of one simple TikTok. And just talking about what's going, and people get interested. And I still get comments on like that they saw it after the fact, so then they want more. So really just kind of talking about things and telling people what's going on. Like posting a flyer isn't enough anymore, where you have to, get in front of the camera, muster. Like sometimes it's hard, sometimes you don't want to talk on camera, but you got to do it. People want to see who they're supporting and who they're going to meet at the front door. And so kind of putting yourself in front of the camera is very important to that.
What do you think about that, Abigail? I'm asking you specifically because Yap Out Yonder seems to be one of these things that might really encourage people to get off their screens and be present in reality.
So social media is an incredibly powerful tool. I was not an influencer or someone with a lot of followers. I still am not really any of those things, but I had this vision and this idea to start this group. I made one TikTok, people showed up, and I'm like, okay, it's working, it's the thing. And Instagram is our main platform. That is how you find out about our walks. But during the walks, I will say during the walks, we are very present with each other. I mean, we do take pictures of birds and, all those things because we're all excited to be outside. But it really does help us connect with each other. And it also helps me spotlight people who come to our groups who are doing also amazing, incredible things within the community. And it helps me connect with other nature organizations. But I do truly, truly, truly believe in the power of social media as much as, it's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it has really brought us together, even to the outdoors where you're not, well, I don't want to say supposed to be on your phone, but where the goal is to be present. But I feel very grateful for what it has done for me. And it's also been able to, through showcasing the pictures of our walks, I think it allows people to see, like you're talking about earlier, the demographics of who is there. And that way people know, like, okay, there's a bunch of different faces, races, ages who come here. So now that I see this, I feel welcome and inclined to come here myself.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the technology-assisted ways for finding friends. Has anybody here used a friending app? I've used Bumble BFF. Has anyone here used that?
I have, yeah.
Eileen, what was it like for you?
I used it when I first moved to Cleveland, and I got a couple friends off of it who have now since, moved away or moved on. But I think it's a helpful tool when you're new to the area. I didn't really know about any of these groups. I think it's a means to an end, and I do think that some of these groups where you can just meet in person and kind of cut out the middleman are a lot easier. But there's something to be said for it. I think that it's a way to make connection with people who are looking for a similar thing. So.
Yeah. Brittany, you raised your hand. What was it like for you?
It was, I was never a dating app person, so I felt like it felt awkward to me to start a conversation with somebody I'd never met. This was a while ago. It was probably like 10-ish years ago, and it was right after college, and it was sort of like, okay, everybody else has moved, has gone somewhere. I'm still like floating around. I don't really know what I'm doing, like what my goals are. And it felt like I wasn't getting the connection that I wanted, I was like, I'm looking for not small talk. Like I want to just get into it. And that's that's not logical. That's not how those things work. But like that was my goal. So I obviously got away from that, but I do see now as I'm doing first round events, it's sort of like reverse engineered. Like first round is almost the opposite of something like a Bumble BFF, where instead of you're doing the work behind a screen, you're doing it first up front, and then you're kind of backing off.
Okay. Rebecca, what was it like for you?
I made a good amount of friends on Bumble BFF, but as Brittany said, I was not a big dating app person, so I was like, I got to get this off my phone. I use Instagram a lot. I have made multiple long-lasting friendships with people that, you just follow those people for 2 years, and you just hype them up on everything that they do, and you're like, why haven't we met yet? We live 20 minutes away. Let's get a cocktail. So I think that's a really good tool because you can also see people's likes and daily life a lot more on Instagram. I think the Bumble BFF tools and all of that are great, but like she said, like the small talk, it's really hard to get off of those apps. So I think the in-person and then just like the social media, a little bit more real life stuff is just so much better.
A more direct conversation. You're not waiting for someone to open an app to respond to you kind of thing.
Right.
It feels more kind of in your face in some ways, which can be a good thing if you're trying to make friends. All right, we have a call now from John in Cleveland Heights. John, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a clinical counselor. Been working in the field for a long time. I just want to mention that Cleveland is unique in that it has, and maybe you've already mentioned this because I caught the program a little late, but Cleveland has one of the largest hiking clubs in the United States, the Cleveland Hiking Club. Cleveland also has a biking club called the CTC, Cleveland Touring Club. These are all online. And also there's an interesting source I just got out of the library. It is a TV series that's a couple years old that starred Sally Field and the tall, dark-haired male actor from How I Met Your Mother. And it's all about a lonely guy in New York City that runs this organization that hooks him up with other people.
Okay, thank you, John. Thanks for sharing that with us. We have just a couple minutes left, so I want to ask one more question of the group and answer in like 30 seconds. We've got 2 minutes. I've seen this idea online that friendships become stronger with consistency, not necessarily intensity. So I'd just like to get everyone's thoughts on that in terms of taking it from those small steps and being patient. And it's a marathon, not a sprint, to start with friendships. And Brittany, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that is just from personal experience, not even necessarily with first round. I do think that the pace at which everybody is living their lives right now, in general, like no matter where you're at in life, it's different, and I think you have to be intentional, but also patient and understanding, and not trying to get people to meet. You have to meet people where they are.
Okay. How about for you, Abigail? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I am a full believer that finding community, finding friendships, it doesn't have to be overly time consuming. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be out of reach or far or strenuous. Really, all it takes is intention and just showing up.
Okay. And Eileen, what do you think?
The consistency is huge. I'll say now I've been going to book club for 2 years, and there are girls that I see at every meeting religiously that I may not text on a regular basis, but every time I see them, we have, a friendly interaction, and I consider them friends at this point. So.
And for you, Rebecca?
I've really been liking the saying lately of if you want a village, you have to be a villager. So you have to meet people where they're at and understand that we're all going through lives separately. So it's kind of like these meetups, if you can make that your monthly meetup, that's great. So if that's the consistency that you're finding are these events, then that's awesome. But kind of realizing like we do all also have to show up for the other person for them to show up for us also. So the consistency there is really important, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being a part of our Sound of Ideas Village today. We appreciate it in this conversation about social groups and loneliness. Our panel, Rebecca Maxwell, founder of She's Company, Eileen Callahan, member of Clee Gals Book Club, Abigail Thomas, creator and co-leader of Yap Out Yonder, and Brittany Marchetti, the founder of First Round Cleveland. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll hear from the godmother of fashion herself, Fern Malice, the creator of New York Fashion Week. Fern will be inducted into the Kent State University School of Fashion Hall of Fame this weekend. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. Back to The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. Twice a year, fashion designers converge in Manhattan for a week-long display of what's new in wardrobe. But it was not always this way. We have the woman who has been dubbed the godmother of fashion to thank for this, Fern Malice. Fern is being inducted into the Kent State University School of Fashion Hall of Fame this week. Fern is famous for creating New York Fashion Week with its predecessor event, 7th on 6th, and getting fashion designers to collaborate and show up in the same space at a time when that was unheard of. Fern was executive director of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, CFDA, from 1991 to 2001, later serving as senior vice president of IMG Fashion. She interviews the greats as hosts of the Fashion Icon series at the 92nd Street Y in New York. We're talking Calvin Klein, Tom Ford, Marc Jacobs, Donna Karan, Michael Kors, Tommy Hilfiger, Betsy Johnson, Valentino, and Diane Diane von Furstenberg, and the list goes on and on and on. And today, we get to ask her the questions. Now, we can't take your calls right now, but we do welcome your thoughts. You can email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Here's my conversation with Fern. Fern Malice, welcome to The Sound of Ideas.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Now, Fern, you not only created, but helped build New York Fashion Week into a global institution. How did you get designers on board with cooperating to turn it into what it is today?
Well, that's a good question. It was clear that something needed to be done. And just as I was ready to start my job as director of the CFDA, is when there was an accident at the Michael Kors show in an empty loft space in Chelsea. And when the bass music went on, which is very, very loud, everything that's not nailed down kind of shakes and moves. And at that show, the ceiling kind of moved and the plaster started to crack over the runway. And plaster landed on the shoulders of Naomi and Cindy and Linda and the one named supermodels that Michael always used. And plaster landed in the laps of the editors from the New York Times and the International Herald Tribune. And they wrote that next morning that we live for fashion, we don't want to die for it. So I said, I think that my job description just changed, because that was not one of the objectives when I was being interviewed and was selected for this position. But that became the mission, to organize, centralize, and modernize the shows. And it was clear that with the accident at Michael's show, a subsequent season, Isaac Mizrahi had a show in a big loft space in Chelsea, in Soho, and it was at night, and there must have been like 1,200 people there, and all the lights blew. And it was a time when people were smoking, and so they had lighters, and people's cameras and flashes were on, and nobody moved because they had a seat at this show. And we had to wait till some backup lighting was installed, because the lighting designer had quickly left to go to his next show. And these were issues that clearly were not helping. So the idea to organize something and make it work and make it safe and sound was in fact embraced by the industry, although lots of designers were still somewhat belligerent about it, wanted their own identity, their own space. And we had lots and lots of meetings with all of the production people, the lighting and sound people, the public relations people, and the designers. And we just made the case for why this needed to happen. And one very, very important meeting was at a place called the 500 Club on top of 500 7th Avenue, one of the main buildings on 7th Avenue with the designer showrooms. And we were presenting our plans, and some young designer in the back of the room said, well, why should I join this project with the tents? I mean, I have lots of my own ideas, and will Calvin Klein show there? And Calvin Klein was sitting in the front row. And I looked at Calvin, I said, Calvin, do you want to come up and address that? And he came up to the podium and said, yes, I will be there. He said, this is important for all of us to do this together, to make a statement for American fashion and to really work together. And that kind of shut up that designer in the back and any other people who had reservations. And that first season and second and third season, they showed with us all together until some of the bigger designers then started to move off to their own venues. But at that point, we had the bulk of the industry and, had anywhere from 60 to 90 designers showing in, 4 tents that we created in Bryant Park.
I think that story really beautifully illustrates the connector that you've been throughout your iconic and continuing career. I want to ask you this. What role do you think, because it's a different landscape now, local communities, not just global platforms, play in sustaining a designer's long-term success today?
Well, I mean, everybody needs their local community, whether that's, in Cleveland or it's in, Nashville or Charleston or New York City. Your community is very much a part of your success. And, and everything has changed. I mean, you can be successful from anywhere in the world now, in any city, anywhere. I mean, you don't need anymore to be in brick and mortar stores, many of which are closing right in front of us in some of the best key cities in America. With this iPhone in your hand, you can do business anywhere. So everything's changed. It's a whole new landscape, and Fashion Week has changed drastically, and it's now kind of more like it was when I first got involved. Now there are 60, 70, 80 shows, and they're in 60, 70, 80 different locations. It makes it very difficult to get around and to see everything. But, lots of people are trying to make amends and trying to figure out ways to get it somewhat back to, a few organized venues.
Hmm. We talk about the importance of the local community and having that sort of grounding point, I guess, when you are able to exist online. Do you have an opinion? What do you think it would take for a city like Cleveland, which does have a fashion industry of its own, but certainly not on the level of New York Fashion Week? What do you think it would take for a city like Cleveland to cultivate a fashion identity that feels authentic and can be so widely recognized?
Takes having a couple of key creatives, designers, and surrounding themselves in that community with creative marketers and brand people and publicists. And it takes real creativity to not just create a collection, but present a point of view and get something that you can put out there on social media, because that's the way everybody communicates now. You don't need to put an ad in a magazine anymore. Uh, and you need to have that talent and be showing and presenting things that people go, "Whoa, I want to know about that. I want to be able to purchase that." And it takes the community to put somewhat of an umbrella over that. Cleveland creatives, Cleveland creates whatever, and put a few people together and start to become that kind of community that sticks together and reaches out to the world and makes strategic decisions, inviting certain people to come and experience their work, and reach out to celebrity stylists, try to get the clothing on some, up and coming stars who might want to wear them. And, there's, you just need to sit at a table with a bunch of creative people with the same passion and commitment, and just brainstorm and come up with the way to do it together.
Now, Fern, you have championed truly incredible designers throughout your career. After everything you've seen from those successes, is there a quality that you notice now or look for now that maybe you didn't recognize as important early on that maybe sticks out to you when you're seeing an emerging designer and you think to yourself, this person is going to be a big deal?
I'm not sure that that's changed a lot through the years. I'm always looking for somebody who is, one of the words I use all the time is nice. You want to be with somebody who's nice and respectful and kind, because that's who you want to support and push forward. I do meet a lot of young emerging designers, and some of them are so aggressive and ambitious that they turn me off. They just think that they are the only best thing that ever happened in the world, and that I or everybody else must pay attention to them. I appreciate that passion, but be respectful of the people and how you approach them and how you present collections and how you present your ideas and how you present yourself. There's a way that you just know it when you meet somebody, and you get a sense of, like, I like this kid. This kid is going to go far. It's always the talent, and it's always the end product that is what will carry you forward. But it's how you communicate that. I think the common thread again is just being nice and being respectful and being curious, and being able to ask the right questions. And I say in my talks, and I will, in a few days at Kent State, talk about how important it is to be a mentor, but to be a mentee. It's a two-way street.
I do want to ask you, though, about access in the world of fashion and how it's evolved. From that front row exclusivity, you talked about those people who didn't want to get out of their seats while the lighting was changed because they had seats at that particular show. Now we're in a landscape where we have social media democratization, and it is, in some ways, simpler to get eyes on your designs. What do you think about that? Do you think that's good, bad, neutral?
Somewhat neutral on it, because that scenario has changed so drastically with social media. There was a time when we did the shows, and and I'm going back to the 90s pretty much, when the front rows were, you'd walk into our tents, and you'd be impressed just looking at the front row before you saw any clothing. You saw the Vogue team and Anna Wintour, you saw the Harper's Bazaar team, you saw the InStyle team, and the Marie Claire team, and Elle, and everybody. And then on the other side of the runway, you'd see Saks Fifth Avenue and Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman, and then all the specialty stores, and and in the seconds rows were the assistants and so have you. And then the third and fourth rows maybe were, other fashion people, and as the time went on, you saw they were bloggers. You don't even hear that word anymore. Now you go into a tent, and I go, I know I'm much older and things have changed and people's jobs have changed, but I'm like, who are these people? They're influencers, they're content creators, and they get the message out instantly. They're barely looking at the clothing on the runway because they're just looking at it on their phone and trying to get the right picture and trying to get it out before anybody else. And I'm not sure that they have that knowledge and experience and history of what came before that, why that look is right or wrong, what makes it happen, what was the influence. There's a certain knowledge that comes with the trade, with people who really do that job and do it well. And all of these folks are out there just trying to get more likes and more hits and more numbers on their accounts. And I'm not sure that that's helpful, and not sure that they even know where and how to buy the clothing or how to make it accessible. Everything is so fast, and it's turned over in nanoseconds. We're just bombarded with imagery and information. And I kind of miss waiting to read a good review from somebody like Kathy Horn, who was at the New York Times, or people like that who really wrote about what we were seeing and why it was great, and what that means to the industry. So, there's something to be said for that immediacy, but it's lost something as well in translation.
Okay. As we start to wrap up here, Fern, one more question for you. You are about to be inducted into the Kent State University School of Fashion Hall of Fame. So if you were advising a young designer starting in Northeast Ohio today, what piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I go back to saying be nice. I say if you really want to do this, get a job working for somebody else first. Follow your dream and find a designer or a brand or a company that you respect and admire. Try to get in the door because you learn so much. Just be a sponge, be curious. Get off your phone for a few minutes. Really take it all in and learn. If you can't get a job with a designer, get a job in a retail store. Learn about the supply chain and how things happen and how merchandise gets to the store and ultimately gets in the hands of customers. Listen to customers, find out what people are looking for, what they like, and what turns them on. Do all of that before you're ready to start your brand and your label. And when you are ready to do that, make sure you get a lawyer early on get everything, copyrighted, trademarked, everything you need to do. Don't wait till you have a problem and then pay the price because you need a lawyer to help you get out of it. And then start that bank account. You need a lot of money. It's extraordinary how much money you go through to try and get a business up and running. So, if it's your parents, your family, your friends, find those people and find somebody who you trust, who has your back. You can't do this alone. You need a partner. You need somebody to navigate this path with you.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and insight with us. Fern Malice, godmother of fashion, inductee into the Kent State University School of Fashion Hall of Fame. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
You can find information about Fern Malice speaking at Kent State on Friday at ideastream.org/SOI. To get the last word on today's topics, email us at soi@ideastream.org or message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Yesterday, we talked about preeclampsia, a high blood pressure pregnancy disorder. Kathy DM'd us on Instagram with what happened during her first pregnancy at age 35. 38 years ago, I developed preeclampsia with my third pregnancy. I was having flashing lights in my vision and shared this with my obstetrician at my 7th month visit. My blood pressure was very high. The doctor sent me to the ER immediately. I was put on magnesium sulfate for 3 days in a dark room with a round-the-clock nurse in case I stroked. They induced delivery at 32 weeks. My baby was born blue and had lung issues. Luke stayed in the hospital for 6 months and came home with oxygen for 6 months. He's now a strapping young man. And that was her third pregnancy. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kathy. Tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we'll talk to poet and essayist Amy Nazuku Matatil about her new book, Bite by Bite, and we'll also talk about the best restaurant guide from Cleveland Magazine. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for keeping the conversation going. We'll see you back here tomorrow.